Aloha, this is Brian Watkins and you are watching my video tutorial for Exam 7, the Direct Labor Variance Report, which is the last project in our Accounting 231 course. In this project you're going to learn how to use mixed variable addressing to prepare a monthly report showing a variance. And if you don't know what a variance is, I've provided a little link to a video another professor has done to show that. But essentially, you, as a manager, have goals that you try to reach, and we call those standards or budgeted amounts. And you're going to do a report that shows the difference between your actual observed amount and your standard data amount. Okay, this project is going to be done in landscape mode with the wide side up. And we're going to take columns A through P, and let's widen those columns to a 12. Alright, I'm going to blow up my screen a bit so you see what I'm doing. The title of our project today is the Direct Labor Variance Report. It's prepared by you. It's prepared on whatever the date is, and give a purpose line for this. So this spreadsheet will prepare a calendar year report of the direct labor variance, and will show both the direct labor rate variance and the direct labor efficiency variances using standard and actual costs through the year. Okay, like we did on the last one on test 6, let's take 5 columns this time. And we'll merge, wrap, top align, and left justify. And then adjust it just right there. Okay. So we are going to start by showing our standard direct labor costs. So if you look at your test 7, I give you your standard data. We're going to have a 250 room hotel. We're going to have a standard labor rate of $10.50 and a standard time to clean a room of just under an hour. So let's prepare this. This is going to have a bar that goes all the way up to column P, and let's do a light blue there. We'll wrap the border, and then we'll come down one line and we'll say standard direct labor rate. Okay, then we'll say standard hours to clean one room, and this will give us standard labor cost per room. Okay, now this is a multiplication exercise, right? We're going to take the rate and multiply it times the hours, and that will give us the cost. Then finally we're going to enter once here the rooms in hotel. Okay, so we're going to name these variables, and don't worry about the blank row 11. Control Shift F3. It will create names from the left column, and it's smart enough to realize that there's no name. So it keeps C11 there, but all of our other names have come out. So we'll cut these, paste them in the E column. Let's put blue on the first 2 and on the rooms and hotel to reflect that these are numbers that we're going to get from our user. And then on the standard labor cost, which is calculated, let's put a top and double bottom border to show that that's a calculation. So what we've got here would be a rate of $10.50, a 0.9 hours to clean a room, and 250 rooms in the hotel. Alright, let's format these numbers. We're going to use 2 formats in all our columns. And be careful with this because it's easy to forget. But if you take and use accounting format, that will line everything up on that decimal place. And so will comma format. It just won't put a $sign there, which would be inappropriate for the hours to clean one room. Okay, now the rooms and hotel, you see how that doesn't line up. To make it line up, we're going to do a comma and then back out those two decimal places, okay? So it may make a point of going through carefully and lining up your numbers, because these kinds of reports, it's important to have your numbers all lined up. All right, easy formula. Our standard labor cost per room is our standard direct labor rate times our standard hours to clean one room. That's going to give us the actual cost, or the standard cost, what we hope to pay to clean one room. All right, so now let's do our actual direct labor costs. We'll go out to column P as well, give it its own color, maybe a green there will mean actual costs, and we'll take and give it a thick border. This report is going to be done on a monthly basis, so we might as well just bold, underline, center that month. Okay, we're going to start with the actual direct labor rate. And then we're going to take, let me put this up here, the actual hours to clean one room. That will give us the actual labor costs per room. And as in the first, we'll have an X symbol showing the multiplication. And we'll slide that over. Then we're going to take hotel rooms, which will be a reference to this 250, and we're going to multiply that times an occupancy percentage for the month, and multiply that times days in month, and that will give us total rooms cleaned, which will be an important number in this exercise. Let's make that a lowercase x equal sign. Okay, we'll push those over to the side. Let's name the cells. So we're going to name them by getting the names and going over 1, Control-Shift F3, and then cutting and pasting up in January. Now the actual rate and hours are going to be collected from a user. So we'll put green there to show actual. Blue is standard, green will be actual. Occupancy percentage will also have to be gathered. We're going to hard code days and month, and we're going to use a reference for the hotel rooms. Okay, so let's take a look here at how we can do an actual labor rate. Rather than have you just kind of fake a rate for each of these cells, that takes a while, I'd like to teach you how to use random numbers in Excel. And we can use rand between to return a random number between two numbers. Now the trick is you can't have decimal points in this function. It has to be whole numbers. So let's just pretend there's no decimal there in the standard direct labor rate. And let's say on the low end, maybe we can pay minimum wage, $8.50. But North Shore of Oahu is a little more expensive. On the high end, we'd probably pay $12.50. Whoops, I made that mistake. $12.50. So you see I'm not using any decimals there. But what I'm going to do, whatever the result is, I'm going to multiply it times 0.01, and that will put the decimal in. So when I hit enter, it gave me 933. I'll make that a accounting format. So that's just a guess. Now, when we use random numbers, the number that your computer comes up with will be different than what you see here. Okay, everybody who uses random numbers, they're random. They will never be the same. The F9 key is the calculate key, and you can see Excel just coming up with random numbers. And we're just doing this to kind of give a flavor of what would happen in an actual business setting where you would be collecting this information every month. Okay, so we'll do a rand between now for the actual hours to clean one room. So if it takes 0.9, let's go down. Maybe a really, really fast house cleaner can do it in, let's say, 0.6. And a really slow one would take twice that time, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Okay, 60 and 120 times 0.01 gives me my actual hours. Now I want it to be something in the ballpark of my standard, and to make those decimals line up, I'm going to make this a comma format. Okay, we need the top and double bottom borders here, and the actual labor cost is going to be this actual rate times actual hours. But I'm not going to do the formula just yet. Now that we have these numbers, let's do the last one. Ran between, let's say our hotel can be anywhere from half full to 100% full. And this is percentage, so times 0.01, and then I'll just hit percentage here. All right. Now, the whole point of this exercise is how do I name variables that don't always refer to the same cell? The standard rate, 1050, will always refer to that cell no matter what. But my actual direct labor rate is going to change. I'm going to have a different actual rate for January, February, March, April, May, and so on. So what I'm going to do, and this is the most important thing, select your January column. You have to be in the E column when you begin this. Everything has to be lined up, because what's going to do is going to make some part of it's going to make the column relative to the E column. Okay, I'll show you how this is going to work. So go to your formula ribbon, your name manager. Okay, look at this name manager here. We've got, if I click on refers to, maybe I'll put it in order. That was close. All right. So we have 1, 2. Here's our standard. I wonder why it's not putting that 10 up there. In any event, let's put that. The standard cost per room is going to have 2 dollar signs in all of its references. But everything in the actual section, what we're going to do, why is it doing that, is we're going to change anything that's after row 16 to have no dollar sign before the column. Okay, so I'm going to click on this one, backspace, and hit the check mark. Okay, so now actual labor cost per room floats on column, but dollar sign it's always found on row 19. And you saw the value that was in there disappear. Excel will only put a value on a named variable when it's absolutely addressed, when it has 2 dollar signs. Otherwise, Excel doesn't know which actual cell you're talking about because it can be more than one. All right, so we've fixed up actual labor cost per room. Let's go and do actual hours to clean one room. So I'm going to take the dollar sign off the E, the actual direct labor rate, take that dollar sign off the E, and the occupancy percentage. Take the dollar sign off from before that E. Okay, and hotel rooms, we're going to use the rooms in hotel right here as an absolute reference. So we don't even need this one. We're going to delete it. So that one's gone. Oh, now it wants to line up, doesn't it? Okay. Now, the standard rates we keep the same. And the, let's see, the actual rates. Good. Okay. Here's the trick. We have to do everything that's below row 16. So here's one that's row 24. Fix that one. Row 23. Fix that one. All right. So the only ones that are left that have 2 dollar signs are the standard direct labor rate, standard hours to clean one room, standard labor costs, and rooms and hotel. Everything else has to have no dollar signs in front of the E. So once you've done that, hit close. That's a very important part of the project. So now when I'm going to use the labor cost, I can't just click on it. It'll give me a relative address. I can't do that because I took the dollar sign off. What I can do, however, is hit the F3 key, and I can say, give me my actual direct labor rate. Okay, and as long as I'm on column E, it will refer to the fixed cell, or the fixed row 17. So I have the rate times, hit F3, times the actual hours to clean one room. And helpfully it puts the boxes around to show you that you're looking at the right ones. Okay, and let's give this an accounting format. All right, hotel rooms is just going to be a reference to, and I can click on this one because it's an absolute reference. Or I could type it, rooms and hotel, and then hit tab to bring it in. Or I could hit F3 and say rooms and hotel. Okay, you only need one rooms and hotel. You can't hard code this because I want to be able to change the 250 and have the second one change. And again, I have to put this into comma format and eliminate the decimal places. Now they all line up. All right, the days in month, you're going to have to do this one by hand. So the days in January are 31. And again, I have to make it comma and get rid of the 2 decimals. Now you've noticed that every time I enter a number or something, it recomputes everything. So if I put the top double bottom border here, and I'm going to do the hotel rooms times, okay, I have to hit F3, occupancy percentage, times days and month. As soon as I hit enter, all the numbers will change because that's what happens with random numbers. But I will have a number that needs to be comma and no decimals. And what this means is, since I have a 250 room hotel and I had 80% occupancy in the month of January, and I cleaned every one of those occupied rooms in one of each of 31 days, I cleaned a total of 6,200 rooms. Okay, so that's going to change every month. And so now that we've got these all done, here's the magic of using those mixed addresses. Now I can take this and I can just copy it down, and it will fill in everywhere it goes with those named variables. So actual rate, actual hours is found in each column. Now I can't do that unless I take out the $sign before the column reference and copy it across. Okay, so I'm going to have to fix the days in the month because it helpfully, just like it gave you my month names, it changed the 31 to a 32. So February is 28, March is 30, or no, March is 31, April is 30, May 31, June is 30, July 31, August 31, September 30, October 31, November 30, December 31. Don't forget that. That's 5 points because you have to have the right numbers. So that's our actual direct labor costs. Here's what we hoped to spend on our rate, but it looks like in January and February we spent more, and in March we spent less. All right, drop a line, and we're going to do the last section. The last section is the actual, bold and underline, variance summary report. And I'm going to make my formulas such that a positive number is a favorable variance and a negative number is an unfavorable variance. Different authors of textbooks do this differently, and in the business world they do it differently. It doesn't matter how you show your variance as long as you tell your user what those numbers mean. So let's make it a gold, and we'll wrap it. And we're going to start with a January. Let's bold, underline, and center our January. Okay, now there's 2 sections we're going to do. The first section is going to be the total actual direct labor cost. So actual direct labor cost for January. Okay, and then we're going to have the standard direct labor costs for January, and that will give us the direct labor variance. Actually, let's call it the total direct labor variance. All right. I'm not going to name these cells because this is the end of my report, and I'm not going to name them because they're never going to show up in another formula. So don't name anything in your variance summary report. However, if you do choose to name it, you have to make sure that you go through and you take out the dollar sign so that when I look at my name manager, okay, refers to everything in everything above row 16 has to have $2 signs. Just remember that. And when you make the change, you'd have to be in January. The easiest way to do it is just don't name the cells in this one. So we can find our actual direct labor costs. Remember, we have to hit F3. You can't just click on it. So our actual labor cost per room. Okay, not the rate. Don't confuse this. We're looking for the costs here. So it's the cost per room times the total rooms cleaned. Okay, let's make that an accounting format. Okay, the standard, I can click on that because there's only one. So I'm not going to look at the rate. I'm looking at the cost. So the standard labor cost per room, hit F3, total rooms cleaned. Okay, and put the format on it. Total labor variance, I'm going to put a top and double bottom border. And then I'm going to say, what is my standard minus my actual? I'm doing it this way because I want the variance to be positive if it's favorable. All right, so let's read this right here. In January, I actually spent $48,825. By virtue of my standard, I would have expected to clean those 4,340 rooms at a cost of $945 each for a total of $41,013. That means I spent more than I thought I was going to spend. So my variance is going to be a negative $7,812. Okay. All right, now let's do the second section. Okay, in order to do the second section, I've edited my screen here so that I can show you the two formulas that you're going to need to memorize to do the rate and efficiency variance. A brief explanation. When I have somebody and I expect to pay them $10 an hour, but I have to pay them $5 an hour, or sorry, $15 an hour, then I get a $5 an hour difference. Okay, so my variance is that $5 an hour times however much I use that employee. So the rate has to do with how much you're paying them. The efficiency variance has to do with how fast they work. Sometimes, if I can get a $20 an hour employee that works 4 times as hard as a $10 an hour employee, I'll hire and pay the extra $10 an hour because I'll make it up on efficiency. Okay, so when you look at these two formulas, you're going to first note that the rate variance takes the difference between the standard and the actual rate, and the efficiency variance takes the difference between standard and actual hours. Then you multiply it times part of your original formula. Now I've come up with this acronym here, and the acronym is, let's make that go away. It won't go away. There it goes. Always have several reasons. The AH, always have, is to remind you that actual hours goes with your first variance formula. Several reasons, SR, should remind you that standard rate goes with your second variance. If you mix these up, you get the variances wrong, and you lose the points. So always have several reasons is how I remember that AH, or actual hours, goes in the first one, and SR, or standard rate, goes in the second. Okay, so let's do this actual, these rate variances. So the direct labor rate variance and the direct labor efficiency variance, okay, those two together will add up to the total direct labor variance, and that better be the total that you came up with in January already, and we'll use a check figure on that. All right. Now remember, we're using some numbers that have mixed addressing. So when I set up my formula here, I need my standard rate. Okay, so I'm going to take my standard rate. And if I wanted to, I could take that standard rate. I don't want to. Let's do it this way. I want to make sure you can see this as I do it. So I will erase that and put my screen over here. Okay, so the rate variance is going to be the standard rate minus the actual rate. And remember, not actual cost, but actual rate times actual hours to clean one room. And then I have to multiply that variance times the total rooms cleaned. Okay, so there's my rate variance. Okay, this tends to be I think the trickiest part of this project. All right, now let's do the efficiency variance. I'm going to take my standard hours to clean one room minus my actual hours to clean one room, and I'm going to multiply this times the SR, or the standard direct labor rate. Multiply that whole thing times total rooms cleaned. So that's my efficiency variance. So all three of these are going to be accounting format. I'm going to have a top and double bottom border down here, and the sum of this cell plus this cell will equal, see those two numbers equal? So my direct labor variance can be calculated two ways. I can either take all of my costs and subtract all of my standard. That'll give me the variance, but I want to get deeper into that, and so I look at the rate variance. How much of that 8,000, which is a good variance, I saved 8,000, how much of it came from efficiency? None of it. Actually, I was a little inefficient. So if my efficiency variance is low, meaning it was unfavorable, I made it up with my rate variance. Okay, so even though my efficiency was 0.91, and it was just a little longer to clean one room, I got such cheap labor rate that it made no difference. Okay, the check figure is simply the first variance minus the second variance formatted. You don't need the dollar sign. Okay, so that's my report. Now if I take that and autofill it all the way over to column P, okay, you'll see it move all the way out. All right, we no longer need those variances, so I'm going to blow this up. Now, here's where you can check yourself to see if you screwed up. Look at your actual direct labor costs. Click on it. There's a little trick here in formulas that I can say trace precedence. Draw arrows to the numbers that go into that formula. The arrows should be in the January column only. Go over to June and do the same thing. See? As long as they're coming from different places there, you're okay. If you made a mistake, you would see something like this. So let's see the standard cost. You'll see that the standard cost always involves the standard labor cost. So this, if I hit trace dependence, goes to every single one of those formulas because it has an absolute reference that always goes back to that cell. Whereas my actuals stay within the column because, I can't stress this enough, I took the dollar sign off from in front of the E for those. All right, so now we're almost done. Let's do a graph. All right, we want a graph of our variances. So I'm going to start with the titles and then go all the way over to December. Okay, so this is the information I want to graph. I hit Insert Line Chart, just like you did in Test 5. Just pick the first one that comes up. Okay, now I want the left margin to be kind of halfway in the January column, and I'm going to pick up and bring it over so that the right column is halfway in the December. All right, now it found my titles just fine: labor rate, labor efficiency, and labor variance. But I've got two blank pieces here. The 1 and 2s are blank. Now you can realize why they're blank, because when we click on the data, right click, select data, you can see when I edit my labor rate variance, the name is fine, but the series values have two empty columns. See how they go to C and D? So what we're going to do is change that C to the letter E. And that'll start it at January and go to December. So now you see the blue line goes from 1 to 12. So I'm going to make that same edit for the efficiency. The name is fine, but the series values, my data starts at E, not at C. Okay, that's good. And I'll edit the total variance to do the same thing. Now you're saying, well, why not just highlight the data and then go back and plug in your names? That would be fine. This is just one way of doing it. If you wanted to, you could have said, I'll just take the data here, and then your names would be messed up and you'd have to go back and find those. All right. Last thing we want to do is we want to change those 1s through 12s. So I'm going to click on it, right click, select data, and instead of just naming them 1, 2, 3, I'm going to edit my horizontal axis labels, and I'm going to select a range, January through December. And when I hit go, you see January through December on your chart. Okay, one last thing that you have to do on your chart. I want you to do a hot link on the title. So I click on the title, okay, then I click in the formula or the formula bar and I hit equals, and I go up to my title here. I'm going to go all the way up to A1. Equals sheet A1, enter. And what I've done is I've now linked whatever is my report title. So let's say I could say directly variance report for year 2016. Whatever I type in cell A1 is hot linked to my graph. And you can do that with anything in your graph. Okay? So keep that in mind when you're on a working group someday working on a graph, that you can actually link it to your report. All right, let's take a look at our output now. File, print. Okay, I'm not seeing the whole thing, and there's no way I'm going to cram all of that onto the same page, but I can cram probably 6 months on. So let's do this. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to shrink the A until my project cuts between June and July. Now I'm going to take my standard information and I'm going to copy it, Control C, above the July month. Okay. Now the last thing I'm going to do is take columns E through J, select the columns. Okay, so only thing selected here is the letter. Click on the letter, go Data, Group, and group the column. Now I've got this control up here at the top. So if I look at it now, I see January through June, and if I go down a page, I see half of my graph, January through June. It's also cut in parts. But if I shrink it up like that, now I can print it, and I have July through December. That's why I made that extra copy of the labor rate, so that when I folded this up, I could still see my stuff. All right, let's make it look better by putting a, let's open it all up. I'm going to put a page break, and then I'm going to put repeating print titles like I did in number 5. So rows to repeat at top. I'm going to put 1 through 4. Okay, I'm going to do a footer as required. Page path, file path footer. Okay, now let's see what we've got. Looks like the page break didn't work, so I'll go back and try that page break again. So breaks, insert. Now let's take a look. That looks like it worked. And then below I can see half of my graph, January through June. And then if I want to print it out again with it folded up like this, I can see the other half of the month, July through December, and July through December on the graph. Folks, that's Accounting 231. You have just finished your last Excel project. I think that you're more than adequately prepared to go out and do great in your first job. You know enough Excel now that you'll probably be confident to handle anything your employer will give you. I've enjoyed working with you. Good luck.